I want to talk a bit today about sort of the revolution in news and information that is occurring right now and what it means for the kind of journalism that we do, which I think ultimately supports the democracies that we enjoy as well. A pretty astonishing story appeared on the page 1 of the Tribune the other day, as well as newspapers and websites around the world. It was a tale about how a 27-year-old internet wizard is about to become one of the world's richest men. $28 million, $28 billion rather, is his expected windfall. Of course, I'm talking about Mark Zuckerberg, whose Facebook networking site is a true phenomenon. It's grown from a college-based networking website in 2004 that had a handful of users to 850 million users today, 3/4 of whom are outside the United States. News story, of course, was the initial public offering that's being planned for Facebook that is going to be valued somewhere around $100 to $125 billion. In our city, in Chicago, Facebook penetration among the digitally connected audience is an amazing 80%. And again, this is a website and a network that didn't exist 8 years ago. Now that's 10 points higher than the combined penetration of the Chicago Tribune, its websites and allied publications like Red Eye and Oi and all that, and we've been at this for 165 years. So it really shows you the speed of change in this environment that we're in. For many people, Facebook is the way that they trade the most personally relevant news of all, the news of themselves and their families and friends. And the analysts say that that kind of growth is not done yet. And so I found myself thinking about Facebook once again over the weekend when I had the honor of introducing one of the heroes of 2011 at Saturday's Chicago Tribune Printers Row Live Author Talk. Wael Ghonim is, of course, the courageous Egyptian internet developer who established a Facebook page criticizing the authoritarian rule of President Hosni Mubarak and calling for protests to end that regime. After street protests against Mubarak erupted in Cairo, Ghonim went there to participate. He was picked up by Mubarak's security forces and held for 11 days. And during that time, many of his friends and family didn't know where he was and feared the worst for him. So upon his release and subsequent fall of Mubarak, he became a symbol, really, of the power of free speech in the information age. But, could he have done that without Facebook or Twitter or the internet itself? Quite possibly not, although he did point out that revolutions have happened in the world before the internet. It's just that it also accelerated the rate of change. So I think those events underscored yet again the fact that we're in the middle of this information revolution that's equal to those spurred by Gutenberg's printing press, by Marconi's radio, and Philo T. Farnsworth's contraption, which we know as television. And the way we react and adapt to that revolution will have huge consequences, not only for the way we consume information, but for the way people around the world determine their own futures. Social media is a force, that's for sure. And more than ever before, it allows this free flow of information among citizens and creates a marketplace of ideas that's a modern successor to the campfires of our ancestors or the coffee houses of London or the public squares of colonial America. As we've seen in Egypt and in the Occupy movement in this country, a new idea or a social movement can spread much more rapidly than previously thought as people of like minds can come together despite authorities' best attempt to quash them. And sometimes, as we saw in Egypt, those ideas and values can spark a true political revolution. The information revolution has deep implications for our industry as well, and I mean the newspaper industry. And when I say the newspaper, I mean everything that we do, whether it's in ink on paper or on a website. We can no longer say with real confidence that the vast majority of people get their vast majority of their news just from us. We're bombarded at every turn through email blasts, through tweets, through car radio, reports, through Facebook pages, through television and many other channels. Information is ubiquitous. And I think some see that as a challenge for a traditional medium such as the Chicago Tribune and newspapers in general, but I think there's a real opportunity in it. And that's because there is one thing that professional journalism can bring that social media cannot, and that is the skeptical eye of a watchdog holding those in power accountable. Journalists are the people who can take that information and process it and interpret it and refine it into something more. And they are the people who can find the information that authorities don't want found. The need for investigative reporting, I think, has never been greater than it is right now in order to counterbalance the activities of authorities who abuse their power. It's a vital role of the free press to hold leaders accountable, and I shudder to think of what will happen to our democracies should investigative journalism disappear. I think there are some troubling signs that leaders in some countries are cracking down on free speech, including social media and the free press, and I'm going to return to that topic a little later and what can be done about that. So faced with this rapidly evolving news media environment, how does a venerable institution like the Chicago Tribune survive? And how do we anticipate and evolve along with those media trends? After all, the Tribune began in 1847 with 400 copies that were printed on a hand press in a building down here on Lake Street. This is the newspaper that helped launch the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, something we like to point out quite often. Through the darkest days of the Civil War and Reconstruction, the Chicago Tribune advocated for political principles that would guide a reborn nation. It was a paper that helped rally Chicago to rebuild after a devastating fire in 1871. In fact, the paper's editor at that time, Joseph Medill, put down his pen and became the mayor of the city of Chicago and laid the foundation for the city that we see today. It's also the paper of Colonel Robert R. McCormick, which may be a familiar name to many of you, one of the titans of 20th century media. He built the Tribune into one of the largest circulation newspapers in America and used it to fuel the growth of two new media of his day, radio and television, which he helped develop from the floor of the Chicago Tribune. Our reporting over the years has helped free innocent men from death row, bring about a moratorium of capital punishment in Illinois. We've exposed corruption at City Hall, advocated for solutions to protect children from violence, offered a new vision for the lakefront, and helped depose, and most recently, a corrupt governor, and along the way awarded some of journalism's highest honors for doing that. So how does a traditional medium like the newspaper thrive in this new age? I think we do it by investing in unique reporting capability and enhancing the experience for readers on all the platforms we offer, digital and print. More than anything, I think we can stay vital by serving as the community's watchdog, which is a theme I'm going to touch on throughout the presentation today. That's something, that investigative reporting is something that no one else can do, not Facebook, not Twitter, no one else. Now, last summer, the Chicago Tribune did what no other newspaper in America has done. We expanded the printed edition of the Tribune, added 44 full news pages a week. That's about a 20% increase in what we call the news hole, the news space. We added pages when everybody else has been cutting them, including us in recent years. At the same time, we refocused our website, chicagotribune.com. We refocused it, redesigned it, relaunched it, and turned it into the breaking news enterprise that has no peer in this city. chicagotribune.com is the top local news site in the city by a wide margin. And we are diversifying by adding a number of niche sites such as chicagoweathercenter.com, redeyechicago.com, oi.com, Chicago Shopping, the list goes on, because we know that audiences want very specific information. Now, we recognize that people have different information needs at different times of the day and in different environments. And so we have recognized that and made the newspaper and the website far more complementary. We know that people increasingly want information and news delivered over their mobile devices. And we're there as well with a new iPad app and other iPhone and Android apps as well. I don't know, if you're like me, you use all kinds of media all day long in all different kinds of settings. Radio, satellite radio, iPhone, TV, cable TV, laptop, desktop, iPad, you name it. I use them all. But the printed newspaper, I think, has a very special appeal to a lot of people. So we invested in the paper, not as the only thing that we would do, not as the only improvement, but understanding that there's a very significant audience of devoted readers who love to come to the news through that printed experience. And so we invested in the paper to ensure that that medium stays vital and rewarding and influential for a long time. We did more than just add pages. We expanded our Chicago area news and investigative reporting, which built on a core Tribune strength. Our business section now delves deeper into the Chicago economy and the people who drive it. We broadened our national and foreign report, which is something that a lot of our readers said they wanted to see more of. We have more news and analysis from our extensive Washington bureau and other reports from around the world. We've also increased our arts and entertainment coverage with more reports from Chicago, but also around the entertainment world as well. We added perspective pages on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, where we added expanded editorial and commentary about the important choices that Chicago and Illinois and the country face. And that idea of opinion leadership, I think, is very much front and center with what we do. It's not that we want to, make up your minds for you. You'll do that just fine, thank you. But we want to we believe that offering insights and perspectives and having a point of view about the issues we face is very helpful to people, and been very gratified by the response to that. And on February 26th, we're going to do something very new and different. We're launching something called Printers Row, which is you may have heard about it, it's a literary journal and membership society. It's our first foray into what we call premium content offerings for Chicago Tribune readers with very specific interests. We'll offer this weekly journal, which will include book reviews and author interviews, and as well as a separate weekly booklet of original Chicago fiction. And we'll also offer it as a membership where you can have access to a number of our many author talks, like the Gonim speech, and a number of other benefits as well. We think it's a new approach that I think will answer a need that we've been hearing from readers for a long time, the interest in literature and this community of readers that want to interact with one another. We think these investments reward the most devoted readers, builds our franchise and our brand, and will help support the kind of journalism that our city, state, and country, and world for that matter, really needs right now. Not long ago, there was a Federal Communications report called, it was on the news gathering resources in the United States. It was a long report. You may not have read it, 475 pages. It was a study called The Information Needs of Communities in the Broadband Age. Now, in it, the FCC warns that there is a shortage of local, professional accountability reporting. And that could lead to more government waste, more local corruption, less effective schools, and other problems. And I think these trends explain why we at the Chicago Tribune have changed our priorities and shifted our resources and really trying to be the premier source of news and information for and about Chicago. We made a commitment to that 3 years ago during a very dark time for the Tribune, and we've held to it. Because of those decisions, I think we're making a lot of progress. I hope you think so as well. We're committed to seeing the world from through the eyes of our reader and capturing what it means to live, work, and play in this region. That, after all, is what a newspaper must do. The story about Tribune Company, our parent company, and its filing for bankruptcy protection, and our exclusive that Governor Rod Blagojevich was under federal investigation for attempting to sell the Senate seat that was vacated by President-elect Obama. We vowed then to overcome our economic problems, and we've made tremendous progress on that, and so that we can keep that most important kind of public service journalism alive. We actually increased our investigative resources. We changed our organization, built new departments, added digital database resources. We geared up. And our goal was to produce, our goal was to have a watchdog story, an investigative story of some kind almost every day. And since then, I think we've lived up to it on most days. We've uncovered how union officials inflated their pensions at the public expense and how some are actually eluding the system by cashing in on 2 or 3 pensions while their rank and file maybe get none. And we forced the state legislature to outlaw those practices. We disclosed how easy it is for murderers and felons of every stripe to escape justice by slipping across our nation's borders because, in large measure, our law enforcement system can't or won't go after them. And I think that has spurred some reforms that are going on right now which should make the apprehension of those criminals easier. Our reporters showed how campus sexual assault is not treated seriously at some of the most important colleges and universities in this country, depriving women of protection against attack in the first place and then due process before the law. Our editorial board has campaigned for accountability from government at every level, and I think is turning the tide on public opinion about the way our political leaders are failing to deal with Illinois' ruinous finances. We've shown how a secret admissions policy at the University of Illinois favored students and with political clout and helped them leapfrog over better students who didn't have that clout. And our reporting got policy changes, a new president, and a new board of directors there. So we're not finished yet. There's a lot of work to be done. We have been really pleased by the reaction, not only from our readers, but the way we've been able to throw a spotlight on these things and get change. So I thought so I think that's the essence of our mission and what we're trying to do. And I thought I'd spend a moment talking about, you've heard me talk about Facebook and social media and so forth, about some of the trends that I think are unfolding right now and what that means for us. And I think that the strategy that we're laying out, the kind of journalism that we're doing, I think can address those trends. First, audiences will continue to fragment. And what I mean by that is smaller groups wanting very specific, customized information and a unique experience in the medium of their choice. Mass is becoming niche. We've created the new Chicago Tribune, obviously, for a larger audience that is devoted to the printed medium. And of course, we want as many people as possible to read it, but we know that it's not for everyone. So we will create other media for other audiences. And we've already established a pretty broad portfolio of print, digital, and targeted media to reach those audience segments, and that portfolio will do nothing but expand in the future and become, this wide array of publications, digital and print, targeted to individual audiences. Second, I think consumers are truly in command of their media, and they will be their own editors in the future. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be a place for me or Margaret Holt or a number of our other editors, but the reality is that you're in control of what you're going to read, what you're going to access, and what you need. And we need to understand that and support that. I think the breathtakingly fast adoption of social media proves this point. Now, the advent of the iPad, which I'm using here, and other tablets and mobile devices certainly will profoundly change the way you interact with the news. You may not give up your newspaper, but you may find that you're adding to the time that you're spending by using a tablet. And I think that will further accelerate this fragmentation of audiences and give people real power. Third, I think that in the digital future, it seems to me that consumers will have to bear a greater share of the cost of news than they have in the past. If they truly value it, they're going to have to pay more for it. Now, when we expanded the Chicago Tribune printed edition about 6 months ago, we also asked readers to pay more for it. Maybe you all have received some of your bills. It went up a fair amount. It's still, I think, a deal, right, when you compare it to the cost of lots of other things. And I'm happy to report that readers saw value in the improvements that we made and have been willing to pay it at a rate that, frankly, exceeded our expectations. Without money to support news gathering, the enterprises that create so-called free news that you can get to on the web now will wither and go away. Truth is, nothing's free. It all costs. Mobile technology is already changing that expectation. You buy an app, you might pay anywhere from 99 cents to $5.99 or more for it. Don't think a thing about it. In the future, there's got to be some better reconciliation between cost, price, and worth. And I think that's what's happening right now. But people have tremendous choice. You all have a world of choice that you maybe didn't have 5 years ago. Certainly didn't have 10 or 15 years ago. So I think you'll pay only when you see real unique value in what we offer you. Therefore, I think we've got to make a choice. What are we really going to be great at in order to get noticed by the consumer and make their cut? So as I've told other groups, I think this is a world of atomized content where audiences are splintered right down to the individual. The audience of me, and what do I want? So is it possible for journalism, the kind of journalism that I've described, to exist in this new world? And I think the answer is yes, and our strengths lie in that public service role. In fact, it seems so old school. It is old school, but it's funny how what's old becomes new again, right? And I think it's maybe more relevant and compelling now than in many years. We all live in real physical places, in neighborhoods with schools and streets and parks and populated by real people. This is a community here today. And while we can increasingly dwell in these private realms, enabled by technology, we still live in this public sphere that is larger than our Facebook friends list. We share common ground and common values, and although sometimes it's hard to see, I think the political discourse that we see in the country today shows that kind of fractionalization. Nevertheless, there are lots of things that we all can share in that regard, and that's what binds us together as a nation. Newspapers, whether printed or digital, must defend those values. And I think that by doing so, we help defend our democratic heritage. And these values include things like honesty and competency and accountability in government, freedom of choice and access to opportunity, personal responsibility as citizens, justice before the law, and just simple fair play. It means that we must be trustworthy and courageous in an age when misinformation and outright lies masquerade as fact and truth and are promulgated at the speed of light around the world. News organizations, I think, like the Chicago Tribune, can make sure that the playing field is even and the game isn't fixed. And there's a lot of people out there that want to make sure that the game's fixed. Therefore, I think we have to be champions for the community through that investigative reporting role. Certainly it's not easy work, besides the economic challenges facing us, and they're huge. We live and work in a state, in Illinois, where there's a long history of political corruption. It almost becomes it's become a joke, actually. If you watch, the Daily Show or Colbert, it's phenomenal. 4 out of the last 6 governors convicted of corruption of some kind. Despite our First Amendment guarantee of that there shall be no law abridging freedom of the press, Illinois has relatively weak laws about freedom of information. And it's way too easy for governments to deny public access to information for reporters or individual citizens by making the process onerous and time-consuming and just discouraging people every step of the way. And we've had to fight those things, not only within the process of the law, but by going to court over it. There's still no federal shield law in this country protecting reporters' notes from intrusive search by prosecutors and defense attorneys. In fact, a few weeks ago, a federal judge, threatened one of our reporters with jail time if she did not turn over notes from an interview. Now, we fought that case successfully in court, and she didn't have to turn it over, but nevertheless, it could be an intimidating process, right, where people feel like if reporters' notes are fair game, people won't tell us things. It'll be difficult to get to the facts. Yet, with all those obstacles, our lot is easy compared to many journalists abroad. Now, after I was invited to speak at the Niagara Foundation, to speak here this morning, I received a few emails from people asking me not to appear because of some troubling anti-free speech and free press trends in Turkey. And I shared that with Hilmy, and wanted to share that with you today. I think the Niagara Foundation is obviously an organization that is purposed to foster understanding and dialogue and communication. And I know that it shares the Tribune's values about honesty and openness in government because the foundation honored our publisher Tony Hunter and the Chicago Tribune a couple of years ago at your annual awards program, and we're grateful for that. So how could I, as a journalist, not support dialogue and free exchange of ideas? So I'm happy to be here today, but I thought it would be a good occasion to raise my concern about the case of journalistic freedom elsewhere in the world, particularly since this idea of investigative reporting is so crucial and so central to our mission here in Chicago. Information is like an escape artist. It's like a river seeking a breach in a levee. It constantly probes for weaknesses. It seeps out. It drips out. It comes out in floods sometimes. It cannot be stopped, despite the best efforts of those who seek to control it. And that is particularly true now with technology. It's clear today that some authorities still don't get this. They continue to stifle free expression and the flow of information. But I also think that they do it at their own peril. Last year, as the world watched transfixed as protesters brought down the downfall of repressive governments in Tunisia and Egypt, and as the news of those protests spread across the Arab world, more protests erupted in autocratic regimes in Libya and Yemen and Syria. Now, most of those protests were at least in part fueled by this common desire for more political freedom and the right to choose a different path, for the right of free speech, really. I think that's a common desire among people everywhere. And I think technology is giving impetus to it. As with other protests in history, the governments tried to crack down on dissent by cracking down on the free flow of information. Notably, Egyptian authorities tried to stifle the protesters' internet access. And since the groups were using social media such as Facebook and Twitter to disseminate information, share anti-government opinion, and build support for their causes. And of course it didn't work. And almost 1 year ago today, Mubarak resigned. Now, there's still a revolution unfolding there. There's still authorities trying to hold on to power, and I believe that in time all that will be resolved, and it may be resolved violently because there still hasn't been a follow-through on meeting the people's desires. I think, sadly, repressive measures are not unique to dictatorships or countries whose leadership oppose the very notion of democracy and self-determination by the people. They are seen also in countries that have otherwise embraced democracy and who have enjoyed cordial relationships, I think, with other democracies such as the United States. Now, free press organizations worldwide, I think, are deeply alarmed by some policies of Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, who is striving to lead his country into membership into the European Union and has been a very important NATO ally. While Mr. Erdogan has implemented many important reforms, I think Turkey continues to lag behind other democracies in terms of promoting the free flow of information, even ranking behind Vladimir Putin's Russia. In a worldwide survey that was just released by a respected group here called Reporters Without Borders, maybe you've heard of this, Turkey ranked 148th out of 179 nations in the survey and fell 10 places. So I bring this up not to be argumentative or rude, but to point out the level of concern that these organizations have and journalists have. And in fact, the U.S. isn't perfect in this either. In that same survey, the U.S., with the vaunted U.S. Constitution, protecting freedom of expression, ranked 47th on the list. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is another group dedicated to defending reporters worldwide, the Erdogan government uses, and I quote, vague defamation laws and sweeping anti-terrorist statutes to rein in not only traditional targets such as leftist and Kurdish journalists, but also government critics in the mainstream media. I think even more worrisome is the imprisonment of two investigative journalists, Nadim Senner and Ahmet Sik, who were arrested 10 months ago and charged with plotting the overthrow of the government. The government insists that they were plotting to help a terrorist organization, Ergenekon, despite offering very little evidence to support those allegations. Now, in his earlier work, Senner was reported that police had failed to do enough to prevent the murder of Turkish Armenian journalist Hrant Dink 5 years ago, and that was his big investigative contribution in recent years. In fact, in 2010, Senner was named a World Press Freedom Hero by the International Press Institute and is recognized around the world for his investigating of corruption. Now, I don't intend to dissect the case, and I'm not close enough to it to be able to speak with authority about the particulars, but I am alarmed every time a government attempts to silence reporters, and I'm skeptical of the case that's brought against them based on what some of the most respected journalistic organizations in the world are saying about it. It looks like intimidation, and I hope that they're freed and that the government changes its practices with regard to journalists, and I hope that it continues to get some attention in this country. So, every day, and I don't know if you've been over at Tribune Tower. If you haven't, Margaret Holt is, raise your hand, Margaret, is a person that can help you by inviting you to come to our newsroom and see, the page one meeting. Margaret does a lot of that, and we encourage that. And if you come over, you'll see the lobby of the Chicago Tribune, which is quite a, I think, a spectacle. Every day I walk through the lobby of the Tribune where there's an inscription in marble on the walls of that quotes our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, as you might expect, who coincidentally had the fervent support of this newspaper, obviously in 1860 and 1864. And it says, "Let the people know the facts and the country will be safe." I think those words are true today, and it's the very core of what we do. It's a powerful distillation of our mission and our goal. We need the information that keeps us safe and tells us how to improve our lives. We need advocates that'll stand up and stand up for people against the abuse of power and ensure that justice is served. I think that's what a free press gives us and always has. And I'm enormously proud of my colleagues at the Chicago Tribune who faced great uncertainty over the last few years as we found our way through a difficult economy and these rapid changes in our media, and had the great personal courage and integrity to work through it and to continue to provide that service. I think they stood and fought and are succeeding. And I hope that you will support them and journalists everywhere in this mission that we have set for ourselves. So I thank you for letting me address you today. Thank you.
This is paper and all these dyes. They just put the dyes on the water. And they mix all of them together and they put the paper and take the paper out. And this is a unique piece. So the significance of this art is all these colors are mixing together, not in and out, but they're just getting together and creating a harmony. And we believe that this is representing our mission. And here as the Niagara Foundation, we're representing this mission. We try to people get together from all walks of life, get them together, create a harmony, and celebrate the diversity. And we really appreciate your being here, Jerry, today. And really appreciate disregarding the emails that for you not to show up here. We are not here to represent any country. We're not here to support the Turkish government or denounce the Turkish government. We just happen to be Turkish Americans here, proud to just bring people together from all walks of life.
Great.
And thanks so much for being here again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. It's great to come here. I think the Niagara Foundation has a tremendous following and has been encouraging dialogue and discussion of issues, and I think that's really a value that we share.